Previously on Featherstone Bicycles. So now that we've gotten the cassette off the rear wheel, we might as well go ahead and take the rest of it apart and get it all cleaned up. But before we do that, we need to take care of a few miscellaneous items. That's what's happening on this episode of Featherstone Bicycles. So in reviewing, editing some of the earlier episodes, I noticed a couple things that I wanted to make sure everybody understood. Back in the first episode, right after we did the initial walkthrough, I talked about the size of the wheels of this particular bike and the size of the frame. And I mentioned that the frame size was 22 inches and how to measure that. That's a little bit difficult to see or grasp while the crank is on. So what I was saying was that the frame size is measured from the center of the bottom bracket up to the very top of the seat post. And so sticking a ruler, tape measure up there, you can see that I'm about halfway, and then I'm 22 inches to the top of the seat post. The other thing I mentioned was that this bike would be for a particularly tall individual. This bike would be for someone who's about 5'10", plus or minus an inch. Second thing I wanted to address was that when we were truing the front wheel on the truing stand, I was primarily working with the true from right to left around the center of the wheel and using these pinchers in order to perform that task. When I spun the wheel afterwards, I didn't notice it at the time, but I noticed it in editing the video, that the other thing you need to do with the truing stand is to calibrate the roundness of the wheel. So the truing stand performs two functions. One is truing it left and right, and one is truing it out of round. So you can also accomplish that with the pinchers by lowering this bar down and then squeezing the pinchers in and using these top of the pinch points as the wheel is going round. You can then raise this bar up, see, and then it starts to hit, and you can adjust it then either way. And so the way you adjust that is so where it's hitting here, these spokes on this side are too loose, and directly 180 degrees away from it, those spokes are too tight. So you just need to make those adjustments and you'll get that round. The other thing I wanted to address was that if you recall in the last episode, I mentioned I was having a lot of trouble getting the smaller chain ring off of the crank unit, and the problem was this nut that's holding it on. The first problem that I encountered, realized afterwards after the filming, was that because this crank is on the drive side, but the nut is on the opposite side, I assumed that you were going to have to loosen this nut in the opposite direction. You were going to have to turn it to the right instead of to the left to loosen it. That was my first mistake. The nut actually comes off lefty-loosey, if you will. So just as if this nut was on the actual drive side. So, or I should say on the other side of the chain ring. So once I got that figured out, I realized I was now trying to get it going in the right direction, but it still wouldn't come off. I put, if you recall, the WD-40 penetrating oil on it. I put a lot of heat on it. I just could not get it off. I was primarily using a large adjustable wrench, and it's actually show you there. It's not a hex. It's basically a round with two flats on either side, and so they make a special wrench that fits this exact shape, and it's a pretty big space here. It's about 42 millimeters. I don't have that wrench, so I primarily use a large adjustable wrench like this. I had it in a vise along here, had the wrench on it, and even had a large cheater bar attached. It wouldn't budge. So when I was bringing the tool back that I used to take the cassette off the rear wheel to a friend of mine who has a bike shop nearby, I asked him if, first of all, he had the special wrench. And he had every size wrench up to 40 millimeters. And of course that didn't fit. And then we sort of measured it and found out it was about 42 millimeters, and looked all over his shop, couldn't find anything. So as a last resort, we went to the crescent wrench, large crescent wrench like this, also with the cheater bar. In the vise, he could not get it. We tried for an hour to try to get this thing off. So I then went to another friend who has another bike shop nearby, walked in, showed him this. I said, having a heck of a time trying to get this nut off. He picked it up, walked over to his vise, put it in the vise, grabbed the exact same size crescent wrench, stuck it on, moved it one little bit, and the thing loosened and came off. I couldn't believe it. My only consolation was I told him that obviously all the work that I had done and the other guy had done all the preliminary work of loosening it, and all he had to do was touch it a little bit. Anyway, now we got the nut off, so we can get that chain ring off and then get into cleaning up the crank. So the first thing I want to do before we get into the back wheel is we've had the chain ring guard soaking in the Evapo-Rust for a few days now, and I'm going to take that out and see how it looks. You can see a lot of the rust has removed, but unfortunately, even as I rub my hand over there, that rust was sitting there for so long, created a lot of pitting. So it's not going to look as shiny and bright as a lot of the other highly chromed pieces, but it's the best we can do. In the meantime, so I'm gonna start cleaning that up. In the meantime, I'm going to take the now very loosened nut off of the crank. That does not need to go into the evapor rust. That is the smaller chain ring, has a lot of rust on it, so we'll put that into the evapor rust and then put the actual crank in there. And unfortunately it doesn't fit all the way, so we're going to have to soak this one side at a time. Okay, so we'll start taking the rear wheel apart. Already got the cassette off in the last episode. And start with the tire. Actually so old it's gonna come right off without even the, there it is, inner tube and everything. Just as a sanity check to make sure that the pattern is the same. So this hole is 1, 2, 3, 4, comes under, 2 away from the valve stem hole, and then 1, 2, 3 comes, and this one is over, 1 to the left, and then that one is under to the next side, on the other side of the axle housing, and then next one that's down down to right in the middle between this one and the next one on the other side is coming over and this way, and then it's this is an over, so then the next over is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is the same. Just wanted to double check before I take it all apart. Well, there you have it. The rear wheel is all apart. Again, I'm leaving the dust caps inside the axle housing. I'll damage them more than I'll help them trying to get them out. The only other thing is the cassette of sprockets. That remains undecided whether or not I'm going to take that apart. It actually is moving very nicely. I'm not sure there's a reason to do it. It's not an entirely difficult task, but there are literally a cajillion tiny ball bearings in there and little pawls. So I'm not sure it's going to be worth it. The finish line one step that I have will clean all this grime up, oil and grime, very nicely, and I've got a special brush for cleaning inside, so we'll see about this. So the next thing we're going to do is get some of these parts from the axle and the axle housing in the solvent. Let those sit for a while. Need a bigger bowl. I think I'll actually let the cassette of sprockets sit in there as well. And just like the front wheel, we've got the rear wheel over the utility tub, and we've got some hot soapy water in there and some steel wool, and we're going to go around and clean the rim. One thing I did notice on this wheel, the rear wheel, when I was cleaning it of the rust, there are some parts that are kind of damaged. So I'm not sure how easy this is going to get trued up after we get the spokes in, but we'll do the best we can. But for the most part, the rust came off very nicely. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Next episode, we'll finish up cleaning the wheel by getting the spokes done and the spoke nipples, and then we'll start the reassembly process. Until then, thanks for watching Featherstone Bicycles.